Wow, good morning, everybody. Brian, thank you so much. Thank you for your leadership, and thank you, Carleton, for all that you've done. I know what it means for students to be up at 8 a.m. Saturday morning. It's about equivalent to my wearing a tie at 8 a.m. Saturday morning. It's not your favorite thing to do. I was told the convocation robes don't cover enough, so I had to wear a tie. But the thrill of being here would top everything. What you've done will make a mark in the world. And what you've started here by voting that the students of Carleton will, as a group, get behind the fight to end extreme poverty, I believe will be a marker for our time. I know Brian was telling me on the way over here how he struggles and all of you struggle to extend this first step. But believe me, what you've done will reverberate widely. I hope and I believe that you can make Carleton's initial step something that is taken up across Canada. And I believe, and I would emphasize that focusing on the universities is the right place to do this. There are a lot of reasons why you've gone first in this fight, why across town at the Parliament, your magnificent Parliament that we passed on the way over here, things have been a lot slower than what they are at the universities. We're in a kind of generational funk, I've decided. I'm a boomer. I'm a late boomer, or one of the younger boomers, but I'm still a boomer generation. And I think we've really messed up in a lot of ways, by the way. The boomers had a great start in the 60s, but then kind of blew it in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and it contributed to this current crisis that a lot of the world is experiencing. And basically, the boomer generation got distracted. It was a very affluent period, and it was seemed a very exciting time to get rich, and it was a very consumerist era, probably the most consumerist era in the history of the world, because it was also the television era. I kind of grew up just as TVs were coming into households for the first time. It was the 1950s. I was born in 1954, and I grew up in front of the TV set watching Captain Kangaroo and the other early shows, pre-Sesame Street and all of that. We saw, I think it's estimated, I don't know how many tens of millions of advertisements along the way, and a lot of the consumer age. And we fell into a kind of solipsistic trap as a society, really committed to ourselves and committed to economic growth as measured by GNP per capita, and more without very much reflection or understanding of what was happening in the rest of the world, and not very much understanding about what was happening to ourselves, even to our own psyches and to our own values and to the way that we were living our lives. And in my view, all of this has contributed to this current crisis that the United States in particular is living through. Canada's escaping it a little bit in the pure economic sense, because you have lots of oil and gas and other commodities, and so, as you know, you've had something of a good few years. But I don't think Canada's escaping it in a moral sense and in an ethical sense. And in fact, the United States, I learned, could disappoint in lots of ways. For me, Canada has been an even bigger disappointment in a lot of ways, because I always expected a lot more of Canada. And I expected that Canada would always be the conscience of North America and keep telling the United States, steer right, stop becoming so extreme and so on. But Canada's lost a little bit of that also, I have to acknowledge. It's become also very consumer-minded and very neglectful of the rest of the world. So I've come to believe, and I hope you guys are going to prove me right, because I don't like to be proved wrong, that it really falls to your generation to get this back on track. I think that today's leaders who are still late boomers or early X-Gen or whatever are coming back to understand some of these issues maybe a little bit more than they did. Maybe 2008 and the financial crisis was a wake-up call. I was at the G20 meeting yesterday in Seoul, and I've been at each of the G20 meetings, and I have to say I actually leave them a little bit less cynical than I go in, even though not every character there is my favorite. There's a kind of seriousness and feeling that, gee, the world's really messed up and we ought to do something about it, that is impressive, even if the solutions coming out of the G20 are not so impressive. But there's at least a solemnity or sense of seriousness and not a sense of recklessness or a mood of recklessness that one might worry about. So world leaders are trying to grapple with these problems. They're not doing a great job, and they're still pulled back by very short-term, very local considerations, and also pulled back by a lot of ignorance. So unfortunately, the world leaders don't really understand the globalized world as well as you already do, and as well as you will. They didn't have third year abroad. They didn't come from as diverse backgrounds. They didn't come from as interconnected a world. They didn't come from as networked a world. And so they're still trying to catch up with the reality, which is that the world is really knit together in many deep and imponderable ways, that the crises that we're facing, whether this interminable war in Afghanistan or violence in Somalia or other things, is not what it looks like of a world that just hates each other, but is a world in which people's basic needs are not being met, and therefore a world that can easily go off the rails. So our leaders don't understand that very well, and they fight absurd wars in ways that can't solve any problems, and they neglect deep problems like climate change or continuing extreme poverty or disease, basically because they're a little bit blinded by the way our economies operate, and they're a little bit confused because they grew up in a different time and they don't really understand the world that they're supposed to be leading. But there is a sense around the world that we need to do something different. I think the campuses are the right place to start this, because you actually have a different life experience already, whether you know it or not. You come from much more diversity and much more interconnectedness and much more awareness of the world than generations that have come before you. You have a knowledge base that is unique. The fact that you're at a world-class university already puts you in the top percent of a percent of a percent of the world. You have a privileged position to understand things, to be able to study them, to be able to look at them analytically, to be able to look at them from a 360-degree perspective. In other words, understand things from the point of view of others, which is probably the hardest damn thing in the whole world to do. But you have a chance to do that. You have, even if the economy's not the greatest it's ever been, you have a kind of affluence and set of opportunities that are unique in world history. And what's really exciting is you have counterparts in other parts of the world. The world's not, fortunately, just waiting on the US and Canada. The world's actually doing things, and all over the world, young people are actually taking initiatives. Technology is improving. mobile and broadband is coming to the villages of Asia and Africa and Latin America, and making connections and solutions possible like never before. So I think you have an opportunity to do some amazing things. And I think you should be very proud that at Carleton you've already started to do that. And as frustrating, or if it seems like a small step that you've taken to support a student levy, it's actually a huge step. It's not a small step at all. First, it's a wonderful and very unusual awareness of the wider world that I think already gives you something that you can count on for the future, that you've been part of that. Second, you've taken a collective decision, which I really appreciate, which is that this was a vote of a collectivity. I like that even more. Some people like it less, but I like that even more than just individual students volunteering to do something. Because we kind of fell into a trap in the US and Canada saying, well, if you want to do it yourself, but we don't have any social responsibility. And I think the world's very dangerous if we leave politics aside and believe that everything is just pure voluntarism, because the world can't work purely on a voluntary basis, though voluntarism can help. The world actually needs political decisions. It needs collective choice. It needs democratic deliberation. And then democratic processes which say we're all in this together, and fight your cause, debate your cause, and then let's take a collective decision. And that's what you've done as a student body. So I think that that's the second mark that I find remarkable and very worthy. And third, you've set a great example. And if you can make this happen in other campuses across Canada, I think that you will not only have set a great example, but started something that will not end until poverty itself ends. And you'll have really set a remarkable process in motion. Now, what you've done is to support the Millennium Villages in particular, so let me say a word about that. The idea of the Millennium Villages is a very basic idea, and that is that if people are empowered with cutting-edge tools, which can be cutting-edge, nothing more than your smartphone, your BlackBerry, your iPhone, or whatever it is, if they have high-yield seed, so another beautiful tool, if I could put it that way, great biology, all embodied in a little seed that's going to grow enough grain for the family to eat or for the community to make an income. Or if they have a rapid diagnostic test available, little plastic strip that now diagnoses malaria within 3 minutes and thereby makes possible treatment of this disease in a community, in a hut, by a community health worker. If communities have these basic tools, they can stand up and get on their way. And that's the idea of the Millennium Villages. The idea is that we have enough that with a little bit of help, the trap of poverty can be unlocked. And we now have about 600,000 people living in Millennium Villages across Africa. And there's a very long waiting list of countries and prime ministers and presidents and villagers and parliamentarians who are writing to me every day, please, we want to be part of this. Because they see in their neighboring village or they see in the neighboring district something remarkable is happening, more foods being grown than ever before, the clinic is working, malaria deaths are coming down, stunting has gone down, children are in school, the school has broadband connectivity, it has a nutritious meal, there's safe water in the water points, whatever it is, people see, hey, life is changing and we can do the same thing. Can we be part of this? Starting in January, quite remarkably, Nigeria is going to devote $500 million of its own budget